Hola a todos y todas, bienvenidos a un nuevo evento de Sevilla.net. Hoy estamos en una sesión un poco especial y es que mientras que solemos tener diferentes tipos de sesiones técnicas, tenemos entrevistas con algunos invitados, la mayoría de casos son cafés virtuales para conocer más sobre las personas, mesas redondas, etcétera. Hoy tenemos una entrevista, pero no es una entrevista personal, es una entrevista sobre un nuevo producto que acaba de salir y para hablar de ello conmigo tengo hoy a Marcelo. ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás?
Buenas tardes, ¿qué pasa, Javi?
¿Cómo
Sí,
estamos?
como tú bien has dicho, hoy tenemos algo un poco especial. De hecho, estamos ahora mismo grabando esta sesión. No es en directo como suele ser habitual. Y, y de hecho, esto es una pequeña introducción en lo que vamos a ver ahora de algo que ya hemos hecho hace unos días, ¿verdad?
Efectivamente, lo que estamos grabando ahora mismo es la intro para el contenido que vais a poder ver a continuación, que se grabó previamente. El motivo por el cual no lo hicimos en directo fue porque tuvimos una entrevista con... pues ¿nos puedes adelantar quién es el invitado de hoy?
Sí, claro. Mads Kristensen.
Efectivamente, es Product Manager del equipo de Visual Studio con una larga trayectoria en Visual Studio, desde la versión 2010, si no recuerdo mal.
Eso es.
Tiene, diría que perfectamente más de 200 extensiones de Visual Studio. Algunas de ellas han acabado en producto, otras no, pero sin duda alguna es alguien que conoce muy bien el funcionamiento y las peticiones y cómo funciona un poco todo el desarrollo y comunidad en torno a Visual Studio. Y el motivo por el cual no lo hicimos en directo es porque nos venía a contar precisamente sobre Visual Studio 2026, que acaba de salir, la primera preview. Tenéis el enlace disponible para probar en los comentarios de este mismo vídeo. Y el vídeo lo grabamos justo antes de que esto fuese público. Por ese motivo hemos decidido esperar hasta que es posible lanzar esto de cara a todos. Ha sido una
Eso es.
entrevista muy interesante, donde hemos conocido un poco más sobre él mismo, sobre un poco su trayectoria, cuál ha sido, por ejemplo, funcionalidad que más ha disfrutado, más le ha costado, o cómo es el proceso de crear Visual Studio. Hay preguntas muy interesantes y, por supuesto, el foco principal de la mayoría de preguntas están en Visual Studio 2026, con todas las novedades, en rendimiento, inteligencia artificial, etcétera. Así que sin más, esperamos que entendáis que este evento no lo pudiéramos hacer en directo y que aún así disfrutéis del contenido que tenéis a continuación.
Pues nada, vamos a ello.
So welcome everyone to this special session because today we have a nice interview. I'm really thrilled to have with us today to Mads Kristensen. He's a principal product manager for the Visual Studio team at Microsoft, and also probably the most prolific Visual Studio extensions creator of any time. As far as I remember, probably have more than 1 or 2 thousand of extensions. And to be honest, I'm really thankful for that because I follow with the documentation sometimes, but I created some extensions in the past. And to be honest, your extension has been really helpful for me to adapt where to include some new item or how to do some stuff. So thank you for all your effort, all your work, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on here. It's a privilege.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
The
oh,
privilege is for us, really.
yeah, and for all the community, because mostly we have .NET sessions, and we can say that we have really different sessions around different stacks, etc. But mostly all of them are using Visual Studio. So probably many of our community will be really excited to see this session.
And the other point is this is the first session with someone in English, and maybe it's special.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't really speak Spanish. I took Spanish in school for a little bit, but no, it's all gone.
Well, we will do the opposite. We will try to do the best for the community also. I'm planning also to maybe use AI to create some subtitles, etc., to help everybody to get the message. So don't worry about it. So yeah, let's start talking about Visual Studio 2026. So congrats for the release. First of all, probably you are all really excited about this moment, and we'll read, the blog post, release notes, everything has been trying, the last bit. And we have seen some deep platform integration in AI, and we want to know more what those foundation sheets means for developers having this integration, where it is integrated, what are the main new functionality related with AI that is included in 2026?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have the platform update or the foundational update in Visual Studio 2026 over the previous version has to do with a couple of different things. So one is that there's a new foundation for performance. So we re-architected parts of Visual Studio for performance reasons, and we're going to expand on that. We're going to do much more on performance, but that foundation allows us to do more. And the same is true for AI. So we're building a foundation where we can deeper integrate AI into the Visual Studio platform itself, so that it knows more about all of the areas of Visual Studio, all the different things that you do, right? You debug, you run your unit test, you run the profiler, you have source control, you might have databases, you'll have your issue tracker and your Azure deployment environments and so on and so forth. There's a lot of different kind of subsystems and places where if the AI knew about it all, it would be able to give you much more useful information and help. And so that's the foundation we're building in, is to kind of get AI into all those places. And then we can then build on top of that going forward. And so the first feature we have that comes with that is the profiler agent that's able to use the profiler tool itself, write benchmarks to scientifically figure out how fast or slow something is, and then make recommendations on how to fix it, runs the benchmarks again, or not to fix it, but how to make the performance better, runs the benchmarks again to prove whether or not it worked, and then, send you a pull request, for instance. So it's that deep integration that allows us to maybe do what was not possible before. Like for some of us, going really super low on like performance optimizations and stuff, that's not my expertise. Like I'm more into like front end stuff, for instance. So like low level stuff is not, I don't have that expertise. So having like an AI that can help open that door that was closed to me before, I didn't know how to do this, and then walk with me through that door, teach me how to do it, show me the plan. And I can at any point say, hey, what you're suggesting right now to optimize performance, I don't understand. Please come up with a different solution, because I don't want code in my project that I don't understand how it works. And then it will come up with something else, right? And it'll try something else, and it will give you a suggestion for something that you probably understand and that you're happy with. Maybe it doesn't have the exact same performance benefit, but it's still a lot better than what was there. Let's say it still solves the performance issue that you might have seen, but it does it in a different way that you understand. And so it teaches you how to do it, so that next time you can write that code more optimized, right? So that's the beauty of it. It's like it makes the impossible possible, and it teaches you how to do it for next time, so you get better as a developer as well. And so that's the whole goal, that's the whole promise, if you will, of bringing AI into the development environment. And this 2026, that foundational layer is what makes that possible for us going forward.
Yeah, that was exactly our next questions, and we was almost going to ask about the profiler agent, because it's one of the main functionalities with AI that called attention. Write a benchmark with benchmark.net and get suggestions about how to optimize. Maybe, as you say, going too deep in the backend and getting an analysis about performance, etc. Some people don't maybe know how to manage some part of that exactly in the correct way, we can say, and getting something that will give you the context and guide you. It's like I think you said, open the door. It's a good definition. So yeah, that's really cool.
And there are other aspects, like with debugging, for instance. So debugging is one of the things that people love most about Visual Studio. Is the debugger is fantastic. But when your application is very complicated, like multi-threaded, for instance, debug something that's multi-threaded down to the metal, like you do some low level stuff. So now you have like these, multi-threaded async call stacks that you have to figure out how it all works out to get. It's really, really difficult. And, sometimes you might have to go down to WinDBG to really get, figure out what's going on. And very few people are comfortable doing that, or even know how to do that, or even know what WinDBG is, right? So for the audience here, if you don't know what WinDBG is, it's just a tool that you can go even deeper than most other tools can when you debug, and it's super low level. It's very hard to use. You really have to understand your computer science, and so I can't use it. It's not for me. Like I don't have that understanding myself, so I'm not able to debug those impossible situations. But I've worked with people that know how to do that, and then I go over to them and say, "Hey, can you help me debug this thing?" And that person was deep into doing something else, and now you'd come disturb them, right? And you already spent a long time, like hours, if not days, trying to debug this thing before you gave up and went to your colleague. And so it's a lot of time wasted here. And it would be really cool if you could do it yourself, and you could do it very quickly, right? And so that's another thing where we can come in and start working on this type of stuff, returning that power, giving you that power that you didn't have before. And I think that's an immensely empowering feeling. Like you don't have to worry about this. You can now be that kind of rock star debugger that your colleague is, and that can now be you. And I really love that idea. And the only way we can really get there is with AI, as we see it today, because that's the only thing that can understand the context of the debugging session that you're in, that is completely unique to your situation in that very moment when you run that particular app, right? It's hard to do like a a solution that like is just based on like semantics that are general. It really has to be like specific to your situation, and that's where the AI comes in and can do stuff that we just couldn't do before, because it needs that individualized scenario-based approach.
Fantastic. Sorry, I have a question, but it's not in the list. I thinking now about this. How is the process to create a new version of Visual Studio? It's a very very difficult question, because I think so that it's very, very extensive process, but I don't know. The things go to a meeting and say, well, what going into the next version? AI, or I don't know. I don't know. But in your experience, how is this process?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. You're the first one who has asked that question. That in my 15 years at Microsoft. So thank you for that. That's a really interesting question. You're going to get a different answer depending on who you ask. So there's the technical answer. There's like a more philosophical answer. There's a more business-oriented answer, and so on. So I'll do my best to kind of answer them all in like in the few minutes that we got for that question, I guess. So we look at when a bunch of different reasons go into cutting a new major version of Visual Studio. Like it's not just one thing. Sometimes one thing weighs very heavily. So for instance, when it came to Visual Studio 2022, we wanted to do 64-bit. We wanted to make that shift from 32 to 64-bit. That is a breaking change. And we wanted it to happen. And so that became such a heavy thing that was the main reason we had to do a new version, because we were going to break backwards compatibility with all extensions and everything. So we can't do that in a minor update. We are not going to break backwards compatibility in a minor update. We require a major update for that. So that could have been a thing, backwards compat. It has been in the past, right? It was in 2022. It could also be other things, like license terms change, and the way the subscription model works. That's actually very complicated, and I don't fully understand this. This is the business side, where I'm like on the developer side of the house, right? But on the business side, you have people that sign up for certain license terms, like enterprise license agreements and so on, that go for a certain amount of years, and they have there's different things in the support lifecycle of Visual Studio, where it's like, okay, we have to now cut a new version to open up for more sales or something like that. That's a very crude way of saying it. It's actually very technical from like a licensing perspective, but that could be a reason. Then it could also be, hey, we have some risky things that we want to do, and it has to take longer, and we're gonna like pull people aside and do stuff. So this time around, it was probably a little bit more on that one, because when we think about performance, it's been for many years, it's been something people keep complaining about. We keep hearing it. Performance is not good, right? And we know we're getting better all the time because we can see the telemetry. The startup is better and all this type of things. But it doesn't matter if the users still feel that it's too slow. So if the perceived performance is not improving, then the performance is not improving. End of story, right? Perceived performance is everything. So this time we're like, okay, if we're finally going to do something about this, we have to take a radically different approach. And so we were able to basically pull people aside for a long time and re-architect parts of Visual Studio to do this. It was kind of a risky thing. And so that was an ongoing. So that was one reason. Another one was that deep Copilot integration. And then we had this new UI. And those three things were like, okay, there's enough here that it's going to take us a while to do all this. This is a new major version right here. And then we actually also had some of that licensing thing I was talking about. So that played a role too. Then another thing was, hey, Visual Studio 2022 is old. We needed a name change. Otherwise, it just seemed old. And we can talk more about, so the name, people are like, well, you just call it 2026. So you're going to have the same issue like next year, right? In a year from now. That's not going to be the case, but we're going to have more information on that coming out in a few weeks. But for now, we needed that new name too, right? So here we had a bunch of different factors playing a role. So that was how that came to be in like, let's say the planning phase. Like, what is it that we want to do? Do we need a new version or not? And we decided that we needed a new version. And then the work begins, right? So before we can do anything, we take what is Visual Studio today, 2022, whatever it was at that time, and we basically take a copy, we create a new branch, right? And that is now the 2026 branch. And then we start working. So we start from where we are. We don't start over, do from scratch, right? It's like when everybody else is making a new version, they take whatever they got and they build on top of that, or they change that. And so we do the same. So once we have that branch, we set up the CI, CD stuff, all that, and that's a whole big thing. Then, we allow people to check in code after that, and then the ball is rolling.
It have a code name or?
Yeah, 18, Dev 18. It's not a code name though. We always call, so Visual Studio 2026 is the 18th version of Visual Studio.
Yeah.
And we, the executable, it's not called Visual Studio.exe. It's called devenv, short for developer environment, devenv.exe. And so we've always called it internally, we always call it dev and then the number. So dev 18, dev 17, dev 16. That's always been the case. So so this time we didn't have a code name per se, like we used to with like back in the early 2000s with Whitby and Orcus and Everett and all those code names for the early Visual Studios. We were about to do, I think we were close to naming Visual Studio 2015. I think we were close to calling it Adams, but then decided against it. So we hadn't had code names since 2008 or 2010, maybe. Yeah.
One little question. How many developers are develop this Visual Studio? You know? Or?
No, we don't know. So, well, it's because it's a fluid thing. It's not a fixed thing. So between developers and managers and PMs and all the people involved, designers, technical PMs, and the list is long. We're probably around 150, maybe to 200. But it's fluent because we have people from other teams coming in and doing some work for a period of time and then leaving. Like, for instance, when Microsoft Teams, they write the Teams toolkit in Visual Studio, so you can write plugins for Teams or apps for Teams. But that's built into Visual Studio. You can say File, New, Project, and then select Teams.
In big numbers.
Yeah, so like at that point, when they did that, we had 4 more people for like 2 months, let's say. Right, so it's fluent. So 150, 200 maybe, something like that.
Well, it's okay.
Yeah, and going back to the latest version, 2026, and let's talk about probably, I will say that is the main request in all the Visual Studio versions, and it's similar in other parts. I work in .NET in mobile, and it's always the first request also, and is performance. What about startup time, solution load, debugging? What has been the improvements in this version? And if you can share some numbers about maybe some reference projects that we use sometimes to do some benchmarks, you can share some information about that?
Yeah, so we will share all the numbers coming out here in a few weeks when we have another update to the insiders where you're going to see even more performance. We're going to wait for that to show because it's going to be more impressive, basically. But the work that's gone in, the re-architecting I was talking about, hits on multiple different aspects of performance. So one is, so right now in Visual Studio 2022 and before that, we ran sequential startup sequence. So for instance, we would spend 50 milliseconds loading something. Then after that was loaded, we would spend 52 milliseconds loading the next thing. And then 100 milliseconds drawing the initial UI. And then 200 milliseconds doing, but these things were waiting on each other. And so what we've done now is that we've been able to tear that apart and run them parallel. So these all run at the same time. And so for instance, how we sign you in with your Microsoft account, or your GitHub account, that now starts much sooner because we can run that sign-in process in parallel with all the other stuff that's going on. And so that parallelization is a huge factor in startup time and in solution load. So most of Visual Studio startup time is going to solution load. So most people that start Visual Studio, they start it by double-clicking an SLN file, a solution file, or in the Windows taskbar, the jump list on Visual Studio. If you have pinned Visual Studio icon down there, that's how they open it. And so Visual Studio doesn't really, I think 80% of the time, it opens because a solution is going to be loaded. It doesn't open to an empty environment. It could also be the start window. You get that little start window, and then you click in what solution you want. And then it starts loading the big Visual Studio IDE as it's loading the solution as well. So now that startup of Visual Studio happens in parallel with the solution being parsed and all the project trees and all that, instead of that happening afterwards. So many different things are being parallelized right now that it matters all of a sudden even more the more cores your machine has, because it can use more cores. So that's a huge difference. So that's why we say, hey, we know that it runs, the more cores you've got, the better it is. And if you've got 16 logical cores, beautiful. Like that's a sweet spot. If you have more, Visual Studio can use that too. But that's like, you're in a really, really good spot if you have 16. I got a Surface Laptop 6, which is not the newest at all. And it's not a big developer laptop. It's kind of a decent mid-range kind of from a hardware perspective laptop. It has 16 cores and it runs very, very beautifully. So that's a main aspect. Another one is like, what are the kind of processes that we got? So, sorry, you look like Javier. Do you have a question for that?
No, yeah, I have a related question with that because there are also new themes. There are like 11, I guess, if I remember well, new themes, new Freehand UI design, new settings window, etc. So there are some new UI stuff. And my question is all this new stuff related with requests, some specific requests, modernization, and also it's associated with performance?
Yeah, all that. No, yeah, a lot of it has to do with user requests. So we spend a lot of time on the feature requests that people send us, And so, yeah, modern UI has been a huge one for a long time. Visual Studio in some of the themes have looked kind of dated for a while. That's what people have been telling us. So that was a big thing people really wanted. But there are more reasons to why we did the new UI. Another one is accessibility. So that's always something that we really care about. And so there's a big push on making Visual Studio as accessible as it possibly can be. So that was another factor in the new modern UI. And then there's just the fluent UI design language that we're using across Microsoft is like, hey, we were lagging behind and we needed to get on board with the design language. So there was like several different reasons. Performance on the design itself, I don't think played much of a role. But there are some things in the WPF we're doing differently because of design considerations. So we are loading, the way we're loading is slightly different. So you'll see if you open Visual Studio 2022, just open it without loading anything, you'll see up in the right hand corner, you'll see like your profile picture, you'll see some of those icons. They come in like one at a time as Visual Studio kind of loads that up. And the Copilot thing comes in, and then 2 seconds later it turns green because that's when the login handshake happened, and their profile, stuff like that. And so we've changed all those controls such that either they load immediately or we remove them. And we've gone through different tool windows to make sure that they open super fast. Because if your environment is such that you have the arrow list and Solution Explorer and Copilot chat and whatever, all sorts of tool windows that are open that has to be loaded when Visual Studio loads, they have to be fast. They can slow down everything. So a huge part has gone into those different UI elements that we're using around the UI to speed them up significantly. Yep.
Okay. I have another question. It's about what is your favorite features in the Visual Studio for your personal. What do you think that is the most helpful for the developers, for example?
Okay. So I've been asked this question quite a bit, and I think I've given a different answer almost every time. Not every time, but almost. And I'll give a different answer this time because of the way you phrased the question. You said, which feature do you think the developers are going to like the most? And I haven't used this answer before, but I think for some developers, I think it's the ability to exclude files in search. So for instance, if you do about a bunch of auto-generated code, like you use code generators or source generators, you have code behind files for like WinForms and stuff that's auto-generated. You don't ever want search to find any of those. That's annoying. So now you can exclude auto-generated files and all that. So your search experience is going to be much more precise, I think. And that's been a long customer ask for a long time. And it was really made important when source generators became a thing in .NET. And so now we have that ability in 2026 to do that. And so that's going to help a lot of people.
We have a related question with this one. And maybe it makes you think harder because, you have seen a lot of Visual Studio versions, you working in probably so many different parts. So what's been the most technically challenging feature that you worked on? And what has been the feature that you are most proud of?
Oh, man.
Many?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out the technical challenge because I feel like a lot of them are very challenging, but there are different levels of challenge. One is a challenge for how do you design something that solves the problem without having any negative side effects. That's one type of challenge that could take a long time to figure out. But usually that happens in the planning and the spec phase, not in the implementation phase. I think another one or another type is the one that just requires so much work by so many people and coordination across many, many teams. Those are the ones that usually are hard to do. And we have several of those. One I would bring out is the new settings page. Every team that has settings that goes into the tools options dialog that used to be up there, they had to rewrite their settings to work in the new modern settings experience. And so some of that was in WinForm. Some of that was even in like native C++ like UI, because it just is old and it hasn't had to change for a long time. But in order to fit into that new JSON-based settings mechanism, it had to be rewritten. And so getting all the teams to do that, and you know, that we still have places that we need to go, some of the more complex settings, but we'll get there. But now we have that foundation, at least. Again, this is a foundational update in many aspects. But getting all the teams to do that, and then all of a sudden you started getting all these requirements, because then the different teams were like, hey, the way we do settings is that we need, you know, a grid that people can add new rows to with like multiple columns. It's like, oh, we don't have that data structure in the new settings. We need to add that data structure and invent how that UI works, because it's all based on like the individual team no longer does the UI themselves. They just provide what type of setting is it, and then the UI is being created for them. And so it's based on like paradigms. And so here are the 5 paradigms that we did to begin with, that we identified, but it turns out we missed a few, right? And so now we have to add more and more. And so that whole dance and getting everybody in line and all that has taken a long time. So like it like over a year, like maybe a year and a half or something. We've been working on that. Just the sheer size of that it's hard to understand just how big something that seems, it doesn't seem like that big a deal, but it's just something that really takes a long time and coordination.
Okay, maybe the last one, Javi.
Yeah, let's do a couple of ones.
Okay, I launched one, and I don't know if one more.
Go for it.
For your personal perspective, okay. After so many years contributing to Visual Studio, what continues to motivate you in this project?
Like like when I write extensions for Visual Studio, or just working on the team, or
in Visual Studio. In Visual Studio, maybe.
in general.
In general, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because that's a great question, man. I think I was a developer for 10 years using Visual Studio before Microsoft. I got hired by Microsoft to work on Visual Studio on the team, right? So I used to be working, I'm from Denmark, and so I used to work in different startup companies over there in Copenhagen, and you know, absolutely loving Visual Studio and .NET and C# and all that stuff. And I remember the first time, it was not long after school, when I was done with school, I had my first job, and I realized, hey, I can do anything. Like, I know, like, I can't code anything, but I know I can learn to code anything if I need to. And that was like that realization. I think most developers at some point remember that there was a time when they realized, hey, I can code anything. If I can think it, I can code it. Even if I don't know how to do it, I know I can learn how to do it. I can figure it out. I can Google it. I can figure it out. And so that feeling of empowerment and creativity and just inspiration that kind of had. And then I had Visual Studio by my side. And no matter what I threw at Visual Studio, it was there. It made it real. Like, I knew that I could go from idea to proof of concept, or even finished product, whether it was a side project or it was at work or whatever it was. And Visual Studio was there all along. Like, I could build phone apps back in, you know, for Windows Mobile. This is before Windows Phone. This is like in 2002 or something. Like, I did that with Compact Framework, and it was amazing. Visual Studio made that so easy. So like, from my brain to a product was like, I could do anything. I'm the king of the world. Like, that feeling of empowerment was just so awesome. And you know, and there's no looking back after that. Like, now you're just, you know, you're going to be a coder for life after that. And Visual Studio was there with me the whole time. And so when I got hired by Microsoft to work on Visual Studio, it was like the dream come true. Like, this tool that I've been using for so long, that has improved my life. I have bet my career on using Visual Studio and .NET for 10 years because of the feeling it gives me every single day. I'm looking forward to getting to the computer and start solving problems with Visual Studio, right? Every single day. It's the best thing in the world. And now being able to pass that on to other people, and to, make it better, not just for myself, but for everybody else too. Like if I can give that feeling to someone else, I mean, come on, that's the, I love that. And so whether I write extensions or we build features for Visual Studio, and especially now, we have so much focus now in like fixing user reported issues and implementing their feature requests and stuff, which is kind of a shift that we've been through the last 3-4 years, 2-3 years, really focusing on that and really take the user and just put them in the center of everything we do. And that's like, it's so perfect. And I love every minute of it. It gets me up in the morning, and it really energizes me.
It's incredible. Many developers around the world using your tool, no?
Yeah, Visual Studio is doing great. People ask, "Oh, why don't you just do VS Code? Right? Why is Visual Studio still a thing?" It's like, Visual Studio is still a thing because it solves the problem best for some people, and we have never had more users of Visual Studio than we do today. It's growing. Visual Studio is growing in popularity. You don't think so, because if you're on like social media and stuff, you hear mostly about VS Code, but Visual Studio is growing, and so it's doing absolutely great, and it's getting better and better. And I think if people try,
it's your baby. It's your baby.
yeah, that too, which is a good feeling, right? So it's my baby. It's a lot of people's baby, and it's doing incredibly well. So I think if people try 2026, they'll see like it's getting better. Like it's better and better every time we do something. It's better. But I think this time around, if I think back, my first release of Visual Studio was where I was on the team was Visual Studio 2010 Service Pack 1. So it's been a while. I don't remember ever having been this excited for a release that we've done, for a major new version that we put up. There's just too much good stuff here. There's too much that we deliver more than any time in the past. I feel like things that people have been actively asking for a long time. This is like such a monumental and ambitious release, specifically targeting what the users really wanted all along, right? And so that makes me very, very excited.
No, absolutely. And I think everybody's really excited. I think that it's an interesting version because you get all the main feedback, not only the typical feedback that it's reiterative version by version, like performance and other stuff, but also we talked about the new modern UI, etc. that I know that has been requested from several times. So you take the request from the people, but also it's a really excited time with the possibilities of AI and all the possibilities. We don't talk today about many other new functionality related with PRs review, with JIT integration and other parts that you also have done. But definitely it's an exciting time, and we are going to close with this. If you want to share for developers that is watching this, a message about the future of developer tool, the future of Visual Studio, a message, what are you going to say? What's the message?
I'll just say, hey, Visual Studio is here to stay. We're not going anywhere, and we're getting better and better. And if you're not sure about AI, which a lot of people aren't, don't worry. You're not alone. Stay with Visual Studio. We'll bring it to you in a way that feels natural, that you can use if you want. You can dial it back, and we'll take you into the future. Visual Studio will take you into the future with it, and you just relax on that front, and know that if you stay with Visual Studio, you're not going to fall behind at all. You're going to be able to use all the latest and greatest tooling, and you will never go obsolete. Visual Studio keeps innovating, and the AI we can do in Visual Studio is much greater than we can do elsewhere, because Visual Studio is the only IDE that knows everything about your workflow. It's not made up of different extensions that don't know about each other, for instance. We know everything, and so the amount of awesomeness that we can get from that is way beyond what we can get from other places can get. And so you'll see all that come with the new foundational update of 2026. So I would urge people to go try it. We're going to keep updating 2026 on a monthly basis. So we're going to have a lot of new features coming in all the time. We're going to release often. You're going to stay on the latest and greatest, and have all those options. And so try that out. Try 2026. You'll love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks so much for sharing these insights, Matt, and for your time with us today. I know that our community will really appreciate it. And yeah, to everybody, everyone watching this, the links to the Visual Studio 2026 insiders will be in the comments. We are going to provide all the feedback and details that we talked in this interview. And yeah, thanks for watching. Happy coding, and see you soon.
Thank you.
See you. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks for having me.